Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Jordan Allen, Senior Vice President at Reveel. Today, we will be discussing the changing logistics and supply chain landscape in a coronavirus and hopefully soon to be post-coronavirus world. We have a number of panelists with us today who will be reviewing the impact COVID-19 has had on their logistics and supply chain, and also provide insight into what to expect next post-COVID-19. We're excited to be doing this and excited to have everyone. So thank you for joining us. With that, I will introduce our panelists. We have Mike Abrams, Vice President of Global Distribution Operations at Future Electronics, Josh Dunham, co-founder of Reveel, Brad Wallace, CFO of True Fragrance, Seth Davis, Principal at Joshua Tree Group, Carrie Phillips, Director at Lou Malnati's, and Thomas Christensen, Director of Supply Chain Advisory with PwC. I'm going to go ahead and have our panelists briefly introduce themselves, and then we will get more into the weeds on what each of our panelists is experiencing in their specific industries. So without further ado, let's start with Mike Abrams from Future Electronics. Mike?
Hey, thanks, Jordan. So, hello everybody, my name is Mike Abrams. I'm the Global Vice President for Future Electronics on the operations and distribution side. We are a worldwide leader in electronic and electromagnetical parts and supply chain solutions. We're headquartered out of Montreal, Quebec, and we have 3 regional distribution centers, one in the Americas, one in Asia, and one in Europe. Our value add is really that we provide unparalleled access to inventory, and we have extremely creative supply chain solutions that allow customers to buy inventory just in time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Let's go to Josh Dunham with Reveel.
Hi, everyone. As Jordan mentioned, I'm Josh Dunham, one of the co-founders of Reveel. Simply stated, we help businesses save money with FedEx and UPS by helping them negotiate their carrier contracts, as well as auditing and providing reporting and analytics and getting money back for late shipments or any billing errors that occur. So my partner, Chad Bevel, and I, years ago, prior to starting Reveel, we used to do sales for DHL. And one of the things that we saw during our time there was just that shippers have absolutely no idea when it comes to what pricing can be available to them. The carriers have done a really, really good job by not being transparent. And one of the things that we saw was that there were really large customers that had less discount than small customers. And we looked at it and we just said, you know, it's really just not fair. And the only reason that was occurring is because shippers had no idea the pricing that could be available to them. So really what we did is we said, you know, we need to do something about it. And what we did is we started Reveel. And the idea was that we wanted to create a business that leveled the playing field and a business that brought transparency to the industry so that shippers could then realize the best possible rates that they can actually get based on their volume.
That's great. Thank you, Josh. And now to Brad Wallace with True Fragrance.
Thanks, Jordan. My name is Brad Wallace. I am the CFO of True Fragrance and Beauty. True Fragrance has been around for just over 50 years, but really our current business has been around for about 20 years. And we got started by selling fragrance and I guess primarily fragrance products into men's clothiers, which 50 years ago still existed and these days don't so much anymore, and Western wear retailers. And over the course of the first 30 years, that's really where the focus of the business was. And then in the early 2000s, we started developing fragrance programs and cosmetic, skincare, other personal care programs, primarily for private label retailers. So the likes of, Gap and Old Navy and American Eagle and Route 21. And so we provide a full category of products to those clients to sell through their thousands of doors, as well as we continue to service the Western market. I mentioned there's not really too many men's clothers anymore, but there are still a decent amount of Western wear, kind of Western lifestyle retailers. And so we sell into roughly 1,500 rooftops in that market, and we have a growing direct consumer business. So what True does really is not so much on the manufacturing side, but really on the design, branding, development side of things. We develop the products, bring components in, fill them at nearby partners, and then finish packing them out and distribute to all of these retail clients. So that's that piece of our business that's really focused on the private label and now the direct consumer has really been for about the last 15, 20 years. That's been our focus.
Awesome. We'll definitely get more into that here in a little bit. Thanks, Brad. Next, we will go to Seth Davis at Joshua Tree Group. Seth.
Hey, good afternoon, Jordan. Yes, this is Seth Davis with Joshua Tree Group. We're a supply chain consulting firm. We work with retailers, consumer products companies in their distribution operations, helping them increase their productivity and reduce cost. And thrilled to be having some conversation with you today about some things that our clients are doing around COVID.
Thanks, Seth. Same here. Now to Carrie Phillips with Lou Malnati's.
Hi, thank you, Jordan. I am Carrie Phillips, the Business Development Manager with Lou Malnati's. I also have a background in our operations side. For those of you who don't know us, we are a family-owned pizzeria in the Chicagoland area and now in 4 other states with 63 restaurants. And then we have a shipping division called Taste of Chicago, where we ship a variety of Chicagoland favorite food nationwide.
Thank you, Carrie. And last but not least, we're also excited to have Thomas Christensen from PwC.
Yes, thank you, Jordan. As Jordan just mentioned, my name is Thomas Christensen. I'm a director within our advisory service, heading up our supply chain and logistics advisory function for private clients. I've been with PwC for about 4 years, and before that I spent a little more than 25 years in the logistics and third-party logistics industry around the world, working in Europe, Asia, and in the US for the past 8 years.
Great. Thanks, Thomas. And thank you all for introducing yourselves. I'd like to switch gears and hone in on what each of you are experiencing in your specific industries. So I'm going to throw it back over to Mike Abrams with Future Electronics. Mike, could you talk to us a little bit about the effects COVID has had on your global supply chain?
Yeah, certainly, Jordan. So there really were 4 main impacts for us. The first and foremost was inventory positioning. And thankfully, or luckily, we were one of the first organizations impacted by the Section 301 tariffs. So that forced us prior to COVID-19 to really think about our inventory strategy and how we could mitigate the punitive tariffs for our customers, particularly those that reside in NAFTA countries. So we took our entire inventory base, split it apart, did things differently, managed different creative solutions from our supply chain side in order to really give the customer a different experience to negate them for that. So that was more luck than it was strategy around COVID-19. So the real challenge then became, what about inventory that we didn't have? And how are we going to get inventory out of China? Now, I'm sure you're aware that as passenger flights started to become less and less frequent out of China, that had a significant impact on our ability to receive goods that were being shipped out of China. 60% of all air freight comes in the belly of commercial aircraft, so our passenger aircraft. So that was really problematic. So trying to get goods from China into Europe forced us to look at different options. Are there over-the-road options? Are there rail and over-the-road options? For the Americas, could we partner with freight forwarders that we hadn't necessarily partnered with before in order to secure capacity? It also forced us to partner with suppliers and in some instances with competitors to buy specific airline capacity, because all of those block service agreements were thrown out the window. So that really forced us to find a different way to get inventory out of Asia. And by the way, the cost grew exponentially, right? What was $3 to $5 a kilo was now $19 and $20 a kilo. So how do you mitigate that without, again, you can't pass that along to your customers. So you can only absorb a certain percentage of that. Then the third thing that was problematic for us, and problematic for anybody, was particularly in the regions where there was capacity constraints due to shelter in place. So for example, as California started to lock down, we wanted to make sure that we were going to be a good partner to the carrier community. So what we did is we implemented a manual release solution, and we would contact every customer prior to shipping an order. We wanted to make sure that that customer was open and ready to receive inventory, because if not, it doesn't make any sense for us to put that in the carrier network only for have that to take up capacity that could be better utilized by essential services or an organization that is shipping something that is due to get to somebody's home. So we wanted to be really strong partners, and we wanted to be really good partners. I'm very proud to say that as shelter in place went across the Americas, we rolled that out, and we very successfully didn't have a high percentage of returns. We did the same thing in Europe, and we did the same thing in Asia as well. We would not ship to customers unless there was a guaranteed person there to receive the inventory. And then the fourth thing was really how do you do this in a manner that makes sure that your people stay safe? And we, at the risk of probably seeming a little bit overly cautious at the beginning, implemented a lot of new things that we had to think outside of the box in order for us to protect our people. Because none of the other upstream supply chain things mattered if you don't have people here in order to process the goods. So things like, access to PPE, temperature checks. We went so far as to put needle point ionizer in our HVAC systems in heavily dense areas to make sure we put plexiglass up everywhere. Things that people have done now, but I would tell you in late February and early March, these conversations seemed revolutionary. And insofar as we had a conversation with one of our largest partners who would not sign off on having a driver come into our facility to have the temperature checked. That led to a pretty lengthy, significant discussion. We actually created a caged environment so that person coming in wouldn't have access to our people, because the worst thing we could do is spend all this time and energy in making sure our people stayed safe and only to have an infection come in from somebody externally. What was interesting to me after was one of the lead things in their marketing material after was how all their drivers go through a temperature screening. So we like to take a little bit of credit for that. Yeah. So those are really the four things and how we've been impacted by it.
Yeah, it's great to hear from companies who have had issues with keeping up on their inventory, because a lot of companies we've talked to have realized that they have way too much inventory, hence hurting their cash flow. So it's good that you guys are on the other side of the fence and makes things a little bit easier for you, I think.
Yeah, and it's one of the beauties of being a privately held organization as well, is we can do things probably a little bit more creatively with working capital than other organizations can do. So we can flex capacity based on, without a lot of the governance, I would say, that the street requires, right? So we can do things in times that are a little bit more creative than other folks. We can buy deep, we can store deep, and not have it necessarily be as punitive as it would be to other organizations. Rebalancing the inventory was a massive chore. I certainly don't want to undersell the level of effort it took to do that. But again, I consider us fortunate to that have taken place early enough so that it was one of the things we could check off the list without us having to go through when COVID-19 hit.
Now, as COVID-19 hopefully starts to die down, right, how will that impact the different strategies you've implemented for managing your inventory? Will you keep things the same? Will you go back to how you've been running things previously?
I would say it just enforces what we learned through the Section 301 tariffs, is that you can't be tethered to a singular solution. You really need to make sure that your supply chain is malleable and that your supply chain is able to adjust to whether it is geopolitical concerns, whether it's through natural disasters. We felt very comfortable. I don't want to say we felt confident, but we felt very comfortable that we've taken a lot of good steps to protect us. But if anybody in 2019 would have said, Mike, you're going to have to solve for the COVID-19 problem, well, I don't think anybody had that type of visibility. We don't know what the balance of 2020 is going to hold, nor do we know what the balance of 2021 is going to hold. My only advice to people is don't be tethered to a singular solution, be malleable, and make sure that when you're thinking through your strategies, your what-if scenarios, as far-fetched as they may seem, are probably closer to reality than you might think.
Well, thank you, Mike. We appreciate you sharing how Future Electronics has successfully navigated the unexpected effects COVID has had on your supply chain. Let's hear from Josh Dunham with Reveel. Josh, can you go into the overall industry trends we're seeing with our clients due to the effects of COVID?
Sure. I mean, really, on a more micro level, like in regard to individual businesses, we're kind of seeing that it's all over the board. Some businesses were forced to shut down, and they just basically stopped shipping altogether. Others increased just astronomically, and then other businesses stayed, kind of fairly neutral. One thing that we definitely have seen is that some of the larger retailers, they're seeing some of the greatest volume increases. And then we've even seen in some instances, the carriers actually limiting the number of daily shipments that they're taking from those retailers, which is kind of interesting. But overall, on the more macro level, we're definitely seeing that residential deliveries as well as oversized or bulky items are up quite a bit. And these are the types of shipments that end up putting strain on the carriers' networks. So that's definitely occurring. Overall, in our client base, though, shipping's up overall. There were some weeks where we saw shipping up 20, 25%. But over the last several weeks, we've started to see that shipping is starting to trend back to some sort of normalization, though.
Yeah. So, Josh, what have shippers done in response to the demands COVID has had on their network?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've really seen a response from FedEx and UPS. They kind of came out initially back in March, and they suspended the money back guarantee. So this isn't something that's new. They do this, in their peak season during the holiday time. So shippers are accustomed to this, but this is a lot different in that it's a mid-year suspension. And basically, I mean, really what the suspension does is it increases costs for those that are auditing their shipments, and it'll increase shippers' costs anywhere from 2 to 5%. Now, one thing that's a little bit different with this suspension is normally they have an end that they come out and say, this will essentially lift this suspension on this date. This is an open-ended suspension, so there really is no end date or end in sight. So that's one thing that we saw directly from FedEx and UPS. The other thing, it's kind of interesting. We can talk about Amazon, and I think the interesting thing is talking about Amazon in the same conversation with FedEx and UPS. So as many of you know, Amazon has started competing directly with FedEx and UPS. Amazon created their Amazon shipping arm, and what they do is they compete directly with FedEx and UPS in select markets. They have a focus on ground shipments, and they basically deliver 7 days a week. They have no residential fees, and they really focused on shipments under 50 pounds. But nonetheless, it's in direct competition with FedEx and UPS, where Amazon will go and deliver packages on behalf of other businesses. So what we did is we actually saw Amazon suspend this service. So I want to be clear that they're still going to deliver packages that are within their own internal network, but they're suspending the external side of their delivery, which is kind of interesting. The other thing that we've seen from the FedEx and UPS side is we've seen them add several surcharge increases. Much like the peak season surcharges that we see during the holiday times, they've basically done this now during the COVID times. They started with international shipments and basically put fees and extra surcharges or extra fees on international shipments. And then basically at the end of May, early June, they imposed those for domestic shipments, targeting really the oversized and the residential packages. And they're also targeting shippers with really, really high volumes. So that's what we've seen them do on the domestic front. Overall, truly the carriers' networks are being strained, and it's leading to higher operating costs. And that's the reason why we're seeing these surcharges. It's really just a way to mitigate some of the increases that they have. in costs on their network. And the unfortunate thing is we just don't know when these surcharges are going to essentially get removed. We don't know when the money back guarantee is going to be reinstated. We can only hope it's soon. But really, up until that point, I mean, shippers are going to have to sustain higher shipping costs.
Yeah. And can you talk to us a little bit about how Reveal's been able to help mitigate some of the surcharges that FedEx and UPS had just announced?
Yeah. So Reveel, one of the services that we do is we help businesses negotiate pricing with FedEx and UPS. And really what we've done is we have direct insight into what the carriers are doing kind of on a macro level in the industry and more on the micro level with individual businesses. And we can essentially take those trends that we're seeing in the market, and we have analysts that have used to work for the carriers, both FedEx on the FedEx and UPS side. And then basically we're able to help customers to really mitigate the increases by renegotiating. So that's really what our plan of attack has been with the carriers.
Thanks, Josh. Let's go to Brad Wallace with True Fragrance. Brad, I know your B2B sales came to a halt there for a minute, but you guys came up with some pretty creative ways to stay relevant and open. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, we at our business, we make soaps, and that allowed us to stay open. But because most of our clients weren't buying, we had to think of some other things to do to kind of fill the time and utilize our supply chain, which was pretty much fully intact. And so, we did a couple things. One of the biggest things we did was we developed a hand sanitizer capability. So we had access to components, whether in China or just in our warehouse in Illinois. And we have had partners that develop formulas that were FDA compliant. And so we were able to develop that new capability and put hand sanitizers in the hands of several of our clients for, when they opened up. And, that looked a number of different ways. We have some clients who were giving them away, like buy a pair of jeans, get a free hand sanitizer. We have some who were looking to sell them. So, there was a strong demand for that business. We also took on some new, kind of new projects that we don't do that often, like product development work on a contract basis. Rather than developing a brand that we're going to manufacture and sell, we were doing design work for others and developing products that ultimately would be owned by somebody else. So, we definitely had to look at our business and look at what we still were able to do. Like I said, our supply chain was pretty much open. So how could we utilize that and, put business through it when our traditional clients weren't buying fragrance products?
Got it. Now, lasting effects of COVID, how do you see this impacting your business moving forward?
I think for us, obviously, client focus is our biggest thing. We really see value in in-person meetings. And so I think like the rest of the world, we are adapting to the virtual meeting, virtual, show and tell of our products and things like that. And I think that is going to have a lasting impact. I think that, our employees are eager to get out there. But I think we'll take a more conservative approach to travel, at least for the near term. And I think a lot of our retail clients don't necessarily want to take in-person meetings either. So, we're going to have to look at that and really kind of rework how we manage our travel and entertainment, and particularly how we show clients products and samples and things like that. So, I think that will definitely have a lasting impact. I think also just from a planning perspective, when we look at our business and how we manage inventory, we usually will buy inventory on behalf of our clients and hold it and sit on it, and then release it to them as needed. And all things like that are always, now going to kind of be looked at through a pandemic lens, where, if we have a shutdown of 2 or 3 or 4 months, how does the cash flow piece of our inventory model work, and what are going to be the expectations of our clients? So lastly, the one piece of our business that really has grown through this, which I think is the case in a lot of retail, is our direct consumer business is stronger than ever. And so, as we look at our supply chain, there's always a focus on making sure that we have those products in stock, but that's definitely more heightened now because we want to make sure if that's where a lot of our sales are coming from, when the rest of retail shuts down, then we want to make sure we have that inventory available and ready to ship.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, from a B2B standpoint, we are what, 4, maybe going on 5 months into COVID. How do you see, do you see that ramping back up anytime soon? Has it already started to?
Yeah, I think that we knew that stores would open, and the big question was how is traffic gonna be in those stores, and what's gonna happen with demand. So far, based on the data that we have, our clients have done really well. Most of them are performing much better on a per store basis than they were prior to COVID, and than they were last year at the same time. So they're all comping positively, and that's really, really encouraging. I think there's still a question mark about whether that's pent-up demand from people who were shut inside without, the ability to buy anything for 3 months. So that's kind of the piece we're sort of waiting out and trying to understand. But I think that so far so good in terms of what our clients are doing. We have clients that when they opened, 75% of their fleet were outselling kind of materially what they did last year. So that is a real positive because we just didn't know if people were going to say, yeah, I don't want to go shopping because I don't want to get sick, or how they were going to feel about that. So it seems like consumers are embracing the store openings, and fingers crossed that continues, and we continue to see the performance that we've seen over the last 3-4 weeks since stores have been open.
Yes, no doubt. Thanks for sharing that, Brad. Fingers crossed things continue to head in that direction. I know we're certainly hopeful. With that, let's switch gears, hop on over to Seth Davis with Joshua Tree Group. Seth, if you could talk to us about how, from Joshua Tree Group's perspective, how you guys saw early on COVID impacting your different clients' supply chain and logistics distribution models.
Sure, thanks, Jordan. So I think primarily we saw a couple of things. One, as things really started to emerge that this was going to be a real thing, a real issue, as the data started flowing in, that this wasn't going away, that this was going to make its way to the United States and impact supply chain and large populations within distribution centers. We started to see two things really emerge from a strategy standpoint. One, companies wanted to keep their people safe. So what are things that we need to be doing immediately to mitigate the risk of the transmittance of COVID? And then number two, people, particularly our retail consumer products clients like a Under Armour or Crocs or Walmart, they're seeing a dramatic shift from retail and their wholesale clients or customers because those stores were closing down, but this massive shift toward direct to consumer. And so what that translated for us was helping partner with them to get very scrappy in the way that they could implement lean process improvements so that they could adapt to that new environment, building flexibility into current processes, but also building flexibility. We had a lot of people that were really excellent at doing retail and wholesale, building in capabilities, transmitting information capabilities to folks so that they could be capable of doing the .com business as well.
So Seth, as things are starting to open back up, what are you guys doing to prepare for that?
Yeah, so our clients are, there's an old saying that you don't necessarily rise to the occasion, you fall to your training and your habits. And so I think what emerged going through this COVID process, there were a lot of vulnerabilities that many of our clients identified, and those who've been able to still flourish and come through COVID, maybe not unscathed, but much smarter and quite a bit wiser on the other side. So some of the key things that we're seeing sort of in this interim period, because we're coming out of COVID, we're starting to see a ramp back up, wholesale business is starting to pick back up, retail starting to pick back up. But there's a bit of this sense of we're in the calm before the storm on twofold. One is this thing going to come back in fourth quarter, the COVID? And then two, we've got a normal retail peak that's coming along, and how do we position ourselves to be successful? So where our clients are asking for our help, certainly in this interim period, is focusing on, again, those scrappy lean process improvements, but also how can we integrate if a company has engineered labor standards or an incentive program, how can we tailor those incentive programs to attract and retain people through that peak season? So reducing turnover, increasing the tenure of that seasonal workforce. Also looking for how do we, now that we've had to pare back our staff because of COVID, as we're ramping back up, how can we make more informed decisions about how we bring those people back on board? And then I think the last thing that we're seeing is a real emphasis. There's been this real sense with a lot of our clients of, hey, we're all in this together, right? So that sense of all-inness is translating to more invitations for associates to participate in the improvement process. So inviting them into the continuous improvement conversation. So in a safe, safe distanced way, having brainstorm sessions, having conversations. How do we knock down walls that in previous seasons would have just been an annoyance, but now is pretty significant? And how do we invest in our own organizational resilience to be able to be successful coming out of this thing?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you mentioned was the calm before the storm. Are there a couple key things that companies can do to prepare for almost adapting to this, or I should say like readapting to this new normal that we're all about to be faced with?
Absolutely. So I think some of the key things are we need to focus on removing obstacles from the workforce. So again, those things that might have been annoyances or moderate impediments in the past, we've got to be able to expect from a smaller workforce greater output, which dovetails really nicely into performance management work that we do. So finding a way to get more from less in order to keep people safe. There's a whole other impetus for productivity improvement. It's actually safety. In doing that, one of the ways is not just asking people to work faster, but how can I knock down those non-value added things that are happening within the warehouse and those obstacles to make them more successful. I think the other piece is truly engaging the workforce. There's a ton of talk about employee engagement all across the industry because it's important. And it's actually been important for a long time, but it's really emerging, especially pre-COVID, with as low as the unemployment rate was. It was important. It's still important whether the unemployment rate is low or not. So
Right.
Engaging that workforce in the continuous improvement conversation, and then aligning incentives, whether that be compensation or other recognition or rewards, with people not just showing up, but showing up ready to really push the mission of the business forward. So those are some of the key things that we're seeing where people are investing time now, because now is the time. You don't build resilience in a crisis, you build it for the crisis. So we've learned a lot in the last couple of months. Now, what do we do now? How do we bolster our own capabilities, our own resilience to be ready for what's next?
Yes, that's huge. I know there are a lot of companies out there who are wishing they'd been more prepared for these unprecedented times. And I think it's the ones who've gotten ahead of it or were able to pivot very quickly who will come out on top. So thank you, Seth. Next up, let's hear from Carrie at Lou Malnati's. Carrie, if you would talk to us a little bit about the effects COVID has had on Lou Malnati's, both from a .com perspective and then also too from a brick and mortar standpoint, the effects that the virus has had on your all's restaurants across the U.S.
Okay, Jordan. It's been an interesting few months. So COVID has definitely affected our business in two very different ways. The restaurant side, we had to close all of our restaurants and just focus on carry out and delivery, which we thankfully already did. We were in the pizza world. But so, and on a plus side of that, we had a bunch of employees that we had to cut back their hours because of, we had to implement social distancing, shift a bunch of our phone orders to our online ordering because we don't have enough phone stations for people to be spread out. And so we've seen, as everyone knows, the restaurant world took a huge hit during COVID. We definitely saw the effect of that. And then on our shipping side, Taste of Chicago, we just saw exponential sales like overnight. We were doing our peak season numbers with no time to prepare. So we needed to implement a second shift at our USDA facility where we make the pizzas, and then also at our warehouse where we fulfill all of the orders. So we were able to use those employees from the restaurants that would have maybe been furloughed or had their hours cut, and we just gave them a different job for the time being, which thankfully we had that surplus of labor on that side. And we have we saw a huge upswing with the stay-at-home order. Shipping, everybody has been just doing meal order kits or frozen food delivered to their door. And it's been huge in the corporate order world now, where employees are working from home and just you can't take clients out and entertain them. So it's been a nice shift there too, just getting additional corporate orders and building that business.
So Carrie, it sounds like you guys are having a ton more corporate orders come in, and obviously people like me stuck at home are ordering a ton of your pizzas. How much has that increased since the start of COVID?
So it's fluctuated each month depending on, the stay-at-home orders. Are they released or strong? We also have social media has taken off, and we've had a couple big influencers feature our product. So we've seen anywhere from a 400 to an 800% year-over-year increase each month since COVID started.
Wow. Have you been able to keep up with the demands, inventory?
No. I mean,
how are you guys adapting?
Yeah, so we're finding a way. So yes, at our USDA facility, we implemented a second shift and went to producing pizzas 6 days a week. And then also used our restaurant kitchens. We can make our non-meat pizzas there. They don't have to be made at the USDA plant. So we could make some cheese pizzas at some of our restaurants that weren't as busy. So we've found ways to keep up with the demand that way, but we are doing peak numbers that normally we have a 3-month lead up period to prepare for with no preparation. So normally you can order day of and we'll ship it that day. And we had a 10-day lead time before we could ship pizzas out at the busiest of this.
Got it. Yeah. Lasting effects of COVID, how do you see this continuing to impact your online orders? Do you think sales will start to scale down a little bit from an online standpoint, or do you think they'll stay pretty steady?
So we have started to see them scale down a bit. However, we have really built our customer base during this. So we're just going strong on the marketing end, and we've learned a lot during this, like just how important social media is and how can we take advantage of that, and just go heavier on the marketing side to hopefully keep up the business.
Yeah. I also saw one of the co-founders, I think he's a co-founder of Barstool Sports, did a a pizza review for Lou Malnati's, and I think that went really well. So do you think that's helped as well?
That was the 1 month that drove about 800% up that month after his review. Yes.
Wow,
Dave,
that's pretty neat.
Yeah, no, we were very thankful for that.
Cool. What about long-term effects of COVID on your brick and mortar restaurants? You guys are starting to open up, it seems like.
So we were able to open up outdoor dining a couple of weeks ago, and that's been going pretty well. And then in a week or two, we get to open indoor dining at it's different in each county, but anywhere 25 to 50% capacity. And we're just trying to find fun ways like to decorate the tables to make it not look so empty in there. And I think, so we made some operational changes, like we implemented curbside pickup and the no contact delivery. So I think those 2 changes will be here to stay forever, which is great. And yeah, the dine-in part, we're not sure how that's going to work. We're testing delivery of beer and wine right now, which I never thought we would be able to do. And so yeah, we don't, as all of us know during COVID, you have to just live in the moment, which has been a great learning experience for me. And we just have been able to be innovative and learn and keep like changing as we go.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like you're lucky because during all of this, you work for a really cool brand and you're getting to see the effects of COVID, but also you guys are adapting pretty quickly. And I don't know, you guys seem to be doing just fine.
Yeah, that part has been fun. We are, like I said, a family-owned company, and I've been there for 19 years. A lot of my coworkers have been there just as long, so you won't find this kind of grit in a lot of companies, but we all just come together like a family and make it work.
No, that's awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. And last but not least, let's hear from Thomas at PwC. Thomas, I know you have a lot of good stuff for us today, so floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jordan. And first of all, thank you to Reveel for having me here. I think this is a great chance for a lot of people to share information and ideas in a very different time. I've been asked to talk specifically about the supply chain and logistics more broadly, and about the new normal as we keep hearing about. And I will start out by saying that we don't actually think there's a new normal. We talk to literally hundreds of clients every week in PwC, and one thing that's clear is there's no new normal. It's going to be multiple new normals in plural. There's going to be a lot of variances between industries, between sectors, but also geographically, and how this is going to pan out. We all know that, for example, the online grocery retailers have had a very booming market here over the last few months with some positive outlooks, whereas the same cannot be said for example, cruise lines or other industries of that nature. So there's going to be a lot of different new normals. And one of the keys to success going forward will be for every company to understand what the new normal is, not only for your industry, not only for your geography, but also for your company specifically. Because even within the same industries, there'll be many companies in totally different situations and circumstances. If we take an example, a few days ago, I spoke with a client who is in the charcoal and briquette business, and they have faced a huge jump in demand over the past few months. They've not been able to keep up with demands as people have been eating more at home. So they are now facing some difficult choices within their industry. Should they invest in additional operations and production capacity? Should they invest in additional logistics capacity to meet the demand, knowing that demand could trickle down again as, for example, restaurants start to reopen, as people start to dine out normal? Or will the demand remain higher? Will the consumer behavior have changed so that more people will actually decide to stay at home and thereby, in many cases, buy more charcoal and briquettes and so on? Some very, very difficult choices in that industry. Similarly, in the, I mentioned before, the online grocery industry as a good example. They've, of course, seen a huge boom in their business over the last few months. Will that remain as things start to get back to something approaching normal? Or will consumer behavior have changed so that many people now who may have been reluctant to buy groceries online in the past, wanted to pick out their own vegetables, their own fruits, will they have become satisfied with the online option? Will they maintain and continue using the online option so that the online grocery stores will see a higher demand also going forward? Or will it return back down to the level it was before the COVID crisis? A lot of different situations, a lot of different decisions to make. That also means for many companies, and now we get back to the supply chain logistics here, that means for many companies, they have to orient themselves within their industry and see, will it be sufficient just to restore or maybe sustain operations the way they were before the COVID crisis, the way maybe they have been to some extent during the COVID crisis? Or will they have to rethink their operating model? Have you lost market shares over the last few months? Have you gained market shares? How do you regain lost market shares? How do you maintain gained market shares? There'll be a lot of decisions to make, and that may, as I said, involve rethinking the operating model to some extent. We have a lot of these types of conversations with many clients these days. And again, there are no two situations that are the same, because then within each company, I mean, do you have a healthy balance sheet? Do you have a healthy profit and loss that makes you as a company agile enough to go and invest in those changes that will put you in a better competitive situation as the market starts to recover, for example? Or are you in a situation where you have too much cash tied up, for example, in inventory or in other working capital elements that makes it more difficult to make investments in new ways of doing things? And what will that mean to the way you operate your business going forward? Because in very few industries will it be enough to just do things the way we did before, and then everything will be back to normal in 6 months' time. That we don't see for very many industries. So back to the things we talk to our clients about, they're really, quite honestly, the same as they were before the COVID crisis in many cases, because there are two things that remain not just relevant, but perhaps even more relevant than ever, and that is that cost leadership, or at least cost competitiveness, is going to be absolutely a key priority, and that cash flow management is going to be a key priority, especially in a market where we expect cash to come at a premium for the foreseeable future. So the things we talk to many clients about is exactly that. Where can we cut costs without jeopardizing our service delivery to our clients? But one thing that many clients have become, and many consumers have become used to in the past 3 months, is that if you order something online with a delivery window between 4 and 6 tomorrow afternoon, you should be able to expect to get your products between 4 and 6 tomorrow afternoon. So if anything, service delivery expectations have probably gone up with consumers. So where can you take out cost? It's really, when we talk logistics, it's the three usual suspects. And if we leave out sourcing and procurement and those kind of things, it's warehouse operations. We see a lot of clients these days actually looking at the warehouse operations again. What may have been okay back in terms of productivity, for example, in terms of on-time shipments, what may have been okay in 2019 may not be okay in the second half of 2020 and onwards. So we see a lot of projects, a lot of discussions around productivity improvements and performance improvements in warehouse operations. And we even see some clients who think this is a good time to go and upgrade or replace their warehouse management systems. Another area where we see a lot of focus right now is on freight spends. Not only on freight rates, we all know that we can renegotiate freight rates. That's what Reveel is doing for many of you. You also see that with full truckloads and LTL, ocean freight and air freight. But we are also looking at other things like truck utilization, mode of transportation. Are you shipping LTL? It would have been more beneficial to ship parcel. Are you shipping full truckloads? It would have been more beneficial to ship it as LTL, or vice versa. There are backhaul opportunities, there are routing opportunities, and all in all, when looking holistically at the freight spend, at the shipment history, we often see very significant savings opportunities, not just from renegotiating rates, but also from realigning the network and the and the shipment setup. And the third one, and I think that's probably going to become even more important going forward, that's the whole network optimization, the network strategy. Where do you have your manufacturing points? Where do you have especially your warehouses, your hubs? Which LTL providers do you use, and where do they have their transload hubs, et cetera, et cetera? Because businesses, customers change, and especially now when the whole market is very dynamic, the network you have a place that may have been great in 2016, 2017, 18, may no longer be the right great network 2020 onwards. We see many clients right now who revisit the network. Maybe they want to take out a warehouse of the mix, maybe they want to add a warehouse to the mix, depending on how the business shifted. And this is really one of my personal pet issues, and something we see a lot these days. Clients coming into this recession, which I believe it is now, with way too much inventory. Back when things were good in the previous years, maybe the concern around having a little too much inventory was not that great because things were overall going pretty well. But heading in with a lot of cash tied up in working capital, a lot of cash tied up in inventory, has really hamstrung many of the clients we talk to, and they ask for our help now in helping them to right-size their inventory. That maybe in the past they have looked at the inventory overall and said we have an inventory turn of 8 per year, 8 turns per year, 6 turns per year, 10 turns per year, whatever. And that may have been considered okay depending on the industry. But what we help them do is to sort of peel back the onion and look at different segments of inventory and show them you have some fast-moving, good inventory that you actually turn 12 times a year. Then you also have a lot of inventory that you really don't turn at all, or maybe you turn it once or twice per year. That's where you can make some adjustments, free up some cash that you can use in investing in maybe driving your business going forward. I've not touched upon where I touched upon before about having solid balance sheets, and of course inventory management is a key part of that. I've not talked about acquisitions and where we expect the markets to be, because that's going to be very different from market to market. But obviously, again, having a solid balance sheet is definitely preferable to having one with a lot of, as I said, working capital tied up. So really, these were the things we talked to clients about in 2015 and 2018, and they're still the things we talk to clients about. But I have to say, maybe with a slightly different sense of urgency in many cases. And I think these will also be things we'll keep talking about over the coming years.
Those are great insights. It's helpful to understand what concerns and obstacles your clients are facing right now, and also how PwC is advising them through it. So thank you, Thomas. Well, all right. This concludes our session for today. I, of course, want to take a second and thank all our panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedules to share their expertise and experiences with Reveel. I know we have many of our clients and other companies joining us today, and I'm confident they were able to gather some great lessons and insights that they'll be able to apply to their own businesses. So truly, thank you, everyone. Lastly, if you have any additional questions for any of our panelists that weren't answered today, or if you're just interested in connecting with one of them, you're welcome to send me an email so I can facilitate an introduction. My email is jordan@reveelgroup.com, and I'm happy to help you all however I can. Thanks, everyone. Take care.